I would have lost everything. Every single time I go for a fast run, I feel like giving up. The difference between getting better and staying the same is pushing through that pain barrier.
Everyone listening would be like, well, what hope is there for me?
It makes this Antarctic challenge really scary. That's the kind of early stages of hypothermia. You're in all kinds of trouble.
I'm not sure the monitor can handle you. As I put that device onto you, I said, you're a specimen.
What an incredible concept and show.
Spencer Matthews.
Yes, sir.
Welcome to the Energy Equation optimized by Pure Sport.
Thank you so much for having me. This is my kind of gig.
Oh, well, we when we sat down and we said, who would be great for this? Who's a high energy guy? You were right at the top of the list.
Well, I've been told before that my energy is frightening, scary, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
I get called intense.
Interesting.
A lot. But I then also read something that I found very interesting that said that you can't teach intensity, and I loved that. Because it means you either have it or you don't.
When we look at energy, we've got to start with the idea, what is the energy required to do 30 marathons in 30 days in the Jordanian desert?
I don't have the scientific answer for you, but I think it was driven by a number of deep desires. Overall, I will always look at that experience as one of the greatest times in my life. And I think people who are kind enough to ask me about it always dwell on the negative elements of it. How hard was it? It must have been so horrible.
Yeah.
And it wasn't at all. It was this immensely purposeful time in my life where, for arguably the first time, I felt really proud of myself and my team and everything we did. And the fundraise was so successful. We raised £630,000 for children, mostly, who really don't deserve to be in these incredibly unfortunate positions that they found themselves in. And the whole thing was a joy, to be honest.
Yeah, it looked, I followed it closely. I think everyone who's involved in physiology, performance, latched onto it because it felt different, it felt new, but you looked like you were in it. You look, it's that challenge. You were enduring it, but you did look like you were in flow.
I think if you're not enjoying it, you've got a lot of water to push uphill.
Yeah.
It's that saying of your perception of something becomes the reality.
Yes.
If I had perceived this to be an impossible task that is going to be incredibly painful, then that is probably what it would have become.
Yeah.
I saw it as something that had never been achieved before, which fueled my ego to find it really interesting and exciting. I also saw it as something that could be incredibly helpful to lots of people.
Yeah.
Not least the people that we're physically raising money for, but others as well. And that came later. I wasn't expecting that, to be honest. But it appeared to have such a positive impact on the lives of quite a few people. I get a lot of messages, a lot of people in the street very kindly saying, I've taken up running because of you. And, I've ran my first 10K the other day because of you. And I've signed up to a marathon because of you. And it's kind of, I wasn't expecting that at all, to be honest. I wanted the world record.
Yeah. And
I wanted a successful fundraise for the children that we were trying to help. But the fact that it had this kind of ripple effect into other people, and I'll always, be deeply touched by just the level of attention it received was crazy. It was all very humbling and just a wonderful experience and something that I'm looking forward to doing again.
Well, that's the interesting piece. It captured a moment, and again, there is that. If you see it, you can believe it, you can become it, and I think a lot of people would have captured that because you are now breaking world records in endurance sport, and that sort of brings us to who you are now. You're taking on now a new challenge, which depending on when this comes out, but you're going to break another world record.
Hopefully.
You are, I'm confident, particularly based on some of the data we've got to discuss today.
Lovely.
I've got some data about your physiology and your energy that gives me great confidence that you're going to keep doing this. But you've now transitioned to this sort of ultra endurance athlete. And is that what you are now? Is that how you define yourself?
Yeah, I suppose so. It's defining myself has almost become less important since growing up a bit and kind of becoming a bit of a different person. I abused alcohol for many years and had lost a sense of kind of who I was. And And I used to chase things that I thought would matter to me that perhaps I have a more rounded view of now.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I don't really care how I'm seen so much, as long as the pursuit of what is happening in my life feels relevant and purposeful. And I don't mean to sound kind of high and mighty, but it's really important to me to be doing things that matter to me and hopefully others.
Yeah.
I had a bit of an epiphany moment with our friend Jake Humphrey. Actually,
Yes.
I was talking to him about my time in the desert, and I came out of the desert just with some quite strong opinions about some of the work that I have been doing for a while, and just decided that I would like to make a change and to focus all of my energy into being fit, healthy, and creating content that I think might be helpful to other people instead of perhaps trying to entertain them.
Yeah, that's a brilliant angle and needed.
And it's been the most wonderful time in my life. There's been so much. It's been really noticed by people who are close to me. Even my team at Cleanco are kind of like, you're very different in a really good way since coming back from the desert. Like it's less, everything is less of a joke, but it doesn't mean to say that you're not a funny guy type thing. You're just more, you feel more on track.
Well, that brings us to this idea of energy. The fact that, because you've been in situations where there's probably what you might now frame as a false energy, propped up by mechanisms of creating false energy, encounters and substances. And that feels like you're living in a very high energy state. So we always start this show we're deep in, but we start it with this idea of, if you had to reflect on your energy as a number between 100 effervescent, unlimited, 0, constricted, fatigued, where are you at? We're going to be up towards the top, I sense.
Yeah, I mean, like, obviously I don't want to say 100 because it sounds a bit silly, but like, I'm not always high energy, but I'm high energy most of the time. Like, I'm very high energy most of the time, to the point when people meet me for the first time, they often think I'm odd almost. Like my wife reminds me of that all the time. But like, I can be over familiar with people very quickly, and I can be quite controversial and like for the sake of it almost. So not controversial in in an odd way, but I'll be almost over familiar with someone that I haven't met very quickly and quite loud and in their face almost. And I don't believe so much in personal space. I'm quite an invasive person, and the energy is high. Usually, let's go with 90. I'm but only because there are times, obviously, when I'm tired and less energetic.
Well, that's the key question, because you're so high energy, and I've experienced all of these things in the joyous encounters we've had, from taking your top off within 8 seconds of meeting you, which I think
you were strapping a device to me, and that was necessary, just totally in passing.
Crucial part of the process.
Yeah.
But this high energy it's infectious, it's great, but it has to come from somewhere. And I want to talk about some of the data we've collected from you.
Yes.
We have to start this with a very simple principle. When I put the monitor on you, and then you sent me a photo of you training, I said, I'm not sure the monitor can handle you. and guess what? It couldn't. The monitor sort of imploded through the sheer vigor and rigor of your training load, your exposure to heat, your use of cold, your lifestyle sort of overwhelmed my stress, fitness, sleep monitor.
Well, I'm sure that there may have been other reasons why it perhaps fell off for a time or two. The day that it fell off was towards the end of a 2-hour Peloton ride, and I had purposefully made the room very hot.
Yeah.
So it's a small room. I'd cranked it up to 30 degrees.
Amazing.
I don't drink throughout the 2 hours.
Yeah.
That's
an interesting piece. I want to touch on that in a minute.
Yeah, just in an effort to make it slightly harder than it would be ordinarily. You sweat more. On those rides, I sometimes sweat as much as 4 kilos. So 4 liters of water I'll lose, 4 liters of sweat. Which is obviously a lot. To people that don't train a lot, they find it very difficult to kind of understand, because you might get on the bike at 81 kilos and you get off the bike at 78 or 77 kilos. Which is obviously a huge amount of weight, in inverted commas, to lose.
Absolutely.
But I find that if you can be, obviously now when I do these world record attempts, I have a team and I'm supported.
Yeah.
But I come from a the ultras that I've done in the past are unsupported. And so there are times where you find yourself hungry, thirsty, without the ability to drink or eat. And so I don't know, I find it an extra element to add to training sometimes. Like if I go out and run 30K, or in some cases even a marathon in training, I won't take water with me. I won't stop. I'll just do the whole thing, and I'll reward myself afterwards.
Really interesting. I suppose in those scenarios, and again,
that's not advised, by the way. So
no, and I would say there's a challenge to that from that fluid volume. And again, there's a combination there. Are you training grit or are you training physiology? Yeah. And there's a path to both. If you want to train the ability to withstand pain, the ability to withstand thirst, that does need some testing.
I think that element of it is interesting to me.
Yeah,
as well.
Clearly, because that's the big thing you get from these. When we look at your physiology, we have to reconcile running 30 marathons in 30 days isn't healthy.
Yeah,
but it might be good for you.
Exactly. So yeah, that were I to tell Chris Taylor, my coach, or Sean Stafford, my coach, I'm going to go and run a marathon, I'm not going to drink any water, I'm going to run it fasted. Yeah, they're both going to say, just, don't bother doing that. You're going to hurt yourself, or it's unhealthy.
Yes.
And I kind of know it is.
Yes.
But it adds that pain barrier to it that is exciting and interesting to me. And it's not so much a sadistic thing. Somebody asked me if it was a sadistic thing. I like making it harder for myself because I feel that it is a greater experience.
Yeah.
And I don't know where that comes from, I suppose. Like, I'm kind of constantly running away from my former self. I'm ashamed actually of kind of like who I used to be and like some of my behavior. And for me to be able to do what I would deem extraordinary things as an ordinary person is really cool. And it's a journey, and it's part of who I want to be. And I'm inspired by other people as well. Like when I look at Ross Edgerly swimming 500 miles or whatever it was, without stopping. Like, I'm at a stage in my life where I would say I could never do that. But I had a lot of that before, right? Where like, I could never do that. I could never do that. No, I would look at a 3:30 marathon. I could never do that. I'd look at a sub 20-minute 5K. I can never do that. Yes. That's not for me.
Yes.
I can lift weights. I don't have to be able to do that. That's not for me. And then when you start achieving things that you thought was previously impossible, it's a real buzz.
Oh,
like when I ran my first sub 20-minute 5K,
huge milestone.
I was like, don't let Vogue listen to this, but I was probably the happiest I've ever been. Right? Like, do you know what I mean?
Everyone in the sub 20 club,
do you know what I mean?
Will be jumping up at home
in that moment.
In
that moment.
But it's you achieve something.
Fall to the floor, and and you're just like, oh my god, I never thought I would be able to do that. Bottling that, and having a swig of that every so often, is so exciting, and that's kind of what I'm all about. Like, what is possible.
I want to talk about data, but I do want to talk about the show because it's going to be genius.
It's called Untapped, and that is what it's all about. It's about human potential and us being sat on mounds of untapped potential, essentially. And the general gist of it is that we can, if we want, all be doing more, and the boundaries are kind of bullshit. Like, I think you grow up with boundaries because you're told that certain things aren't possible and that you shouldn't be doing that, or you look at heroes of yours and they've done it and you think you're not as good as them and that you can't do it. And we're here to just say, that there's every chance that you can do all these, awesome things that you want to do. And we want to kind of give people the tools and just the confidence to try, right? Because I think that it's so, like, if you looked at me 6 years ago, something like that, I was 100+ kilos.
Yeah.
I'd be out of breath walking up a single flight of stairs. Yeah. If you'd asked me to run a fast kilometer, forget it. I'd hurt myself doing it. Yeah. Forget running 10K.
Yes.
I couldn't bench. I was benching less than my body weight.
Yep.
Like, I was 103 kilos. I could probably bench 80 kilos.
Yeah, which is still good. That's just a caveat for our average listener. But it's not.
If you're 100 kilos, you don't really have any excuse to not be benching more than that, in my opinion. No. If you go to the gym. But, like, do you know what I mean? And like,
I agree. You're a long way
I made
away.
a lot of changes in my life, and I want to share those with people. And I'm growing, learning. I want to create a community where we can all learn and grow together, if that's the kind of thing you're into. There's no pressure to do any of the things that we're talking about, but we're going to test ourselves, challenge ourselves, push ourselves. We're going to be taking a bunch of us running, on a weekly basis, I hope. And, we're going to try and build a really positive community that can help people go that little bit further. And who knows then where you can get to.
Absolutely.
That's kind of where I am, and that's what I want for others.
That's going to be great. A roadmap to being more.
I hope so.
Oh, so again, it's a perfect. People want it. They need and again, we need a bit of a North Star. So people who say that is how you begin that journey to testing what you're made of. So Untapped, I'm going to be all in.
Thank you.
All in. I've got to get to your data. Because
Please,
it's good.
sorry, you've been trying to get to the
Well, I
data
haven't
for
been
a while
trying to
now.
get. I've been sort of angling the data. But the reason I want to get to data is normally people are trying to hide away from their data. Your data is excellent. Now you melted my monitor. We've accepted that. All has been forgiven. It's not your fault, and we think it's probably more a technology problem.
Yes.
But because you've got really into sort of the quantified self, you thankfully are measuring yourself through a variety of other devices, including a Whoop band.
Yes, Whoop.
Yeah, and Whoop is measuring the same parameter that I would measure with my chest device, which is heart rate variability.
Okay.
You're also logging your activity onto Strava. You're also capturing your exercise data through Chorus.
Yeah.
So you gave me a sort of smorgasbord of data. So we've got a completely unique energy equation here where I've had to retrofit all this data into our format.
Well, thank you.
It's been a delight, actually, because I suddenly got, I got 6 months of data versus, or certainly, weeks and weeks of data. So, you've given us that energy score of 90. I want to talk about 3 separate things. Your fitness, which I want to define a little bit. Your sleep, which is a crux of really how we recover, and your body's ability to recover itself, which we might refer as stress management.
Okay.
But I want to start with fitness. And I ran a small test on you when you came into the studio today to measure something called your VO2 max. And I referred to you with a certain word. As I put that device onto you, I said, you're a specimen.
I mean, honestly, that is being referred to as a specimen has to be one of the highlights of my life, right? Because that's a word that I reserve for some serious beasts out there.
Well, you're in the club. It's one where, and actually, I say that I said it as the result came in, rather than when I put the device on you. So I wasn't basing this purely on your aesthetic.
Yeah.
And you clearly have you're very lean. Your body composition. I don't know if you've got your body fat.
I did. So I find. I'm pretty sure I'm sub 10%.
I'd be amazed if you're more than 10.
And I did one of those machines that you stand on. A machine.
Yes.
Sean Stafford has one in his gym.
Yeah,
and you hold your arms out, and it measured me at about 7% body fat. Haven't been clipped or anything. I think that includes the fat around your organs, which
it does visceral fat as well.
Which God, I don't know how to melt that off. That is just there. I think
again, sometimes your visceral fat it stays a little bit more stubbornly. It's attached a bit more to stress and a bit more hormonal.
Yeah.
But 7% is a phenomenon. So for those listening, your ideal male of your age would be below about 19%. When you start to move to single digits, that's normally when you get that extreme visibility of musculature, and you cannot get there without a sort of fairly fastidious approach to training and diet and sleep. So
but I would love to, once we've gone through the data, I'd love to talk to you about I don't feel like I'm punishing myself.
No.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like when I think, anyone, well, people listening to this probably are into their health and fitness, so it's safe to assume that they've seen bodybuilders, competitions, stuff like that. When you look at people who are competing on stage as an example,
yeah,
it's very difficult to maintain or even get to that level without actually starving, punishing yourself, pushing yourself in ways that are very unhealthy, really, in the pursuit of your goal, right? Which, of course, I think that those two things have to come into play together. But I live a very, I full life where I love training, I love food. I don't restrict much. I found a great balance. And anyway, we'll do the data, but I'd love to talk to you about that, because I think I don't want people to be turned off when they look at people who are, say, 7% body fat and quite muscular,
yes,
and go, Oh, but they don't. They must
There's no
not have
joy
a
in
life.
their life. No
And
joy in
they
their
must. They must push themselves so hard that actually they don't enjoy themselves. And do they ever relax? And the answer is yes.
Yeah.
I spend all evening relaxing, and I love being busy. I love training. I eat tons of food,
your calorie burn
Yeah.
is astronomical. But
Yeah.
that's because your training volume is astronomical. So you've earned the right to not restrict, because the volume of calories you would eat would be far greater than I would eat, or most people would consume. Because
I don't count calories. I never have.
And nor should you ever. But
Yeah.
what we know is the amount of combustion you're creating is justifying a pretty balanced life. But your training volume is the linchpin to that, which is a phenomenon.
Yeah.
So so when I put that device on you, we generally give people a score out of 100 for their physical activity and fitness, and we base that on how active they are during the day, which is a combination of active steps plus this figure called VO2 max, which is an objective measurement of your cardiovascular fitness or cardiorespiratory fitness, which is the engine you used to get yourself across 30 marathons in 30 days. So we know it's going to be good, but we don't know what the value was. So we've got an average of about 22,000 steps a day, which is astronomical. And you spend a lot of time on a bike, so that's not a fair capture of your overall physical activity. That's not a capture of your benching. So that's huge. Then we've got a VO2 max of 62 milliliters per kilogram per minute, which is outstanding.
Is it?
Very much so.
I don't know anything about VO2 max. I hear about it all the time.
Why VO2 max is interesting to us is not just because we get incredible athletes, and you are. That's a brilliant result. I'll need to check back on the files, but you might have snuck the top spot there with that one.
Excellent.
Which is excellent. We're really saying we want the general population above 30, 32. If it's too low, people shouldn't maybe go for complex surgery because they may not survive the anesthetic. So VO2 max isn't just a performance marker. It's how effective you are at being a human being.
Can your VO2 max, I'm assuming that your VO2 max, you can work on it
enormously.
So as you get fitter, essentially, your VO2 max will increase.
It will, and you can be fitter without it increasing. So what you'll have noticed in your training is you can improve your efficiency so that you're burning more fat at the same heart rate as you used to burn sugar. So humans, we're all a bit like a Prius. When we're operating at low intensity, we can run on our battery, which is fat and oxygen. When we drive out of the car park and we get onto the motorway, we have to move to dirty fuel, which in our case is carbohydrate and sugar. So you can be significantly fitter without changing your VO2 max, but by being able to do more work while still running on fat and oxygen. And that's what a lot of the coaches who are working with you about things like interval training and changing that intensity. They're trying to get you able to do most of your work using fat as your major fuel. For you, being tolerant of being carbohydrate depleted, and it's a bit like I train to build that endurance. Endurance itself is fascinating because what will separate you being able to do what you do versus other people will probably not come back to VO2 max. Right? So there'll be people with a higher VO2 max than you who couldn't do 30 marathons in 30 days through the desert. And when we look at fatigue, the reason people stop is rarely that their body stops. It's that their brain has listened to the signal of their body saying, I think you should stop.
How much of being able to push yourself physically is psychological, in your opinion?
Most. Because,
really?
Most. And that interesting piece, when you see someone finish a marathon, they don't collapse and die. Right? So they in fact, when someone wins a race at the Olympics, they do a victory lap. So you're like, hang on a minute, you didn't empty the tank because you would implode on the point you finished. And what you've got is there's a theory called central governor theory, that your brain is always listening to these signals from the body and it's protecting you. If you totally exhausted yourself, there's a risk that you could die. So your body's always protecting you. So what you're getting is all the cells are sending messages to your brain going, tell Spencer to stop. Tell Spencer to stop. And there's a famous, I think it's Jans Voigt was the Tour de France cyclist who came up with the phrase, shut up legs, which is well used, which is the fact he's telling his body, no.
And that, I suppose, is what you work on, to silence that quickly.
Totally.
I suppose, because that's something that I work on still. I'll jump in an ice bath. It'll feel horrendous because I didn't really feel like getting in it in the first place. Yes. And it's winter and it's 6 a.m.
Yes.
And it's kind of like no part of me wants to actually do this.
Yes.
And you get in and you think, well, no one's watching. I'll just do a quick 30 seconds. It doesn't matter.
Yes.
And then, you know, and you get in and your body and your mind says, get out. And you go, this is the point of it.
Well,
you know, so
that's
it's
the
kind
best
of like
description of cold.
You can get out, but obviously there's no real point of having got in, you know, if you're going to get out as soon as it's uncomfortable. And that goes for running and everything. Like every single time I go running still,
yes,
even though, you know, I'm not a bad runner.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that to be modest.
No,
I'm not a phenomenal runner.
Yeah.
I'm a good runner. You know, but I'm nowhere near professional level, even at an old age, right?
Yes.
So like I wouldn't make the England Masters or anything near it at this point in my life.
Yep.
So, and I think that's easy for people to forget. You know, they look at the 30 marathons and they go, well, you're an insane runner. It's like, I am a good runner, but you know, Chris Taylor is a far better runner.
Yeah.
Alex Winchester, who you probably haven't heard of, a friend of mine, much better runner than me.
Yeah.
Most people in Battersea Park who are running the track are better than me
Yes.
at running. But there's that mental piece that comes into stuff to go further and harder than other people that I think I'm quite good at. But it's every single time I go for a fast run, I feel like giving up.
Yes.
And I feel like stopping early every time. This is not like, this is just a normal human thing. Every time I go for a sub 20, even though I can comfortably run a sub 25K now, you know, I can do 17:40 or something like that now.
Disgraceful.
But every single time, I want to stop at 2K.
Yeah.
Every time.
Yeah.
And that's just normal.
And everyone does. And some people don't.
And then you do the 3K, and then, you know, you're in even more pain, but there's only 2K left.
Yeah.
And then you do a kind of slower, you know, 4th K because you're not a very experienced 5K runner. And then you've only got 1K left. So, you know, it's the blaring, you know, song that you love, and it's, you know, all systems go for the last kilometer. But the difference between getting better and staying the same is pushing through that pain barrier, I think. And if you want to stay the same level, that's absolutely fine. Like, for example, my wife Vogue loves running. She has no interest in being faster. She has no interest in running a half marathon or a marathon. She does not care to be seen as a good runner or a fast runner. It makes her feel good. She runs quite slowly, and she does her 5K from time to time. And that's all she wants. And that is fine.
She doesn't need more.
She doesn't need more from it. She gets exactly what she wants from it. And that's and I really struggled with that to begin with. I was like, let me show you how to stride. And let me show you like we'll go on a pyramid run, you know, we'll get slightly faster, then we'll get slightly slower. Or, you know, we'll do a progressive run every kilometer, we'll get a little bit faster. And she said, I have no interest.
No.
I don't want to get faster.
No.
And I was like, but I actually think that you'll love it if you get a bit faster, because you'll be able to coast at a faster pace and you'll get more endorphins from your run and you'll feel a greater sense of achievement from your run. And she was like, I don't want it.
No.
And I was like, okay.
And that's such a great observation. And again, people use some people use it as a decompression. Others are building that muscle of grit. And you are in that form of character. And I would put grit, which is arguably one of the most defining features of good psychological well-being, as something that's missing in a lot of people's lives. And exercise and cold are both ways of proving you can persevere. As you're beginning to learn during this episode, Spencer is proof that pushing the limits requires more than just mental determination. It's about giving your body the right tools to perform and recover. After all, our body sweats when we work hard to control our temperature, but that same sweat includes key electrolytes, or salts, that help your muscles function best. Salts that the body needs to replenish if it's going to continue performing at optimal levels. Pure Sports Ultra Electrolytes are packed with the perfect formula to stay hydrated, energized, and balanced. That's 1,000 milligrams of sodium, no artificial flavors, and 0 sugar. They're performance built to support your toughest challenges, whether that is running through deserts or conquering Ironman or tackling your first 5 kilometers. It's all relative. But one thing's true for us all: we do need to replace what we lose. Visit puresport.co to discover the Ultra Electrolytes using our unique discount code EE10 at checkout for an extra 10% off. So, when you're in the pain cave, as I think is a delightful phrase, what's your version of shut up legs? What are you saying to yourself?
I feel like I can be a bit weak in the pain cave sometimes. I can also be quite strong.
That's going to need some context.
I don't know. Like, I think it kind of depends. It depends. Like, I like I like running with people. I find it easier to run with people that are better runners than me. Same as anything, really. Like if I'm rolling jiu-jitsu, I prefer to roll with somebody that is better than me, and because you learn. When I'm on my own, and I did the majority of my training block for the 1330 on my own.
Yeah.
But a lot of it was I ran just under 2,000 kilometers in preparation for the 1330. And a lot of it was quite slow. A lot of it was recovery run. A lot of it was building distance in the legs. So it's quite easy to do. You listen to a podcast and you just go out for 3 hours, if you can find the time.
There's still an urge to stop though. There's still, when you've done 3.
It was kind of okay, all that, because you're not training your anaerobic.
Yes. It's not the real pain.
Like I find a really fast lap of Battersea Park, which is only 3.2 kilometers.
Yes.
At a 3:30 pace.
Yes.
Much harder than running a marathon.
Yes.
Or
that's 3 minutes 30 per kilometer. Just for
I can't maintain that pace for very long.
Yeah,
but
it's rapid.
But I kind of I do that from time to time. I go out and just blast like a couple of laps, quite fast.
There's no mantra. There's no Spencer. You are, you're a hero. What are you saying to yourself? I spend the
majority of my run in pain,
in
mental pain.
But what are you saying to yourself?
That it's over when it's over, and and that you're not to stop. I've stopped as well, by the way. So if I'm being completely candid, I've not achieved like a 10K before. Quite recently, I've gone out and just really hammered it.
Yeah.
And got to kind of 8K and just gone I'm done. Which is it's kind of unusual for me.
Yeah.
But if I'm running on my own, it's freezing outside. I haven't got my pals with me. I'm looking down at my watch. I'm just and I'm finding it just exhausting. And I know I've got to go home to the 3 kids. Yeah. It's bath time, it's dinner. It's it's 6 a.m. wake up the next day. I've got a full day of work the following day. I'm like, maybe I don't need to do these last 2 kilometers at this, earth-shattering pace for me, because, maybe I'm pushing myself in a meaningless way. Sometimes I feel that way. And that's a little dance that I do with myself that I really don't appreciate, because you should really set yourself the goal of what you want to do and try and achieve that goal in that run. Because as soon as you start bending the rules, it can creep into being normal, and I had to beat that out of myself recently, because, not physically, of course, but I did that. I bailed on a 10K early because I just didn't really feel up to it. And my groin was sore from the marathons. I've got quite a tight right. It's literally, I don't know how else to describe it other than it's quite deep in here.
Yeah.
And it's I kind of bailed on it, and I thought to myself, God, that's really unusual. And then when I was next doing it, I was like, I had the urge to stop early.
Yes.
And I was like, okay, I cannot get into the mindset that it's okay to stop early. And so I actually did more that time. I did 12, and then just pushed myself to kind of do more. But yeah, I mean, I know that I'm not sat here as some elite professional athlete, but I have the same feelings as everybody else when you go in training, when it's hard and it's rough and it's cold and it's windy and it's wet and you can't be bothered, and it's kind of, you just feel like you can't be bothered to go and do that long run that you said you were going to do. And I think, ultimately, if you're looking to be resilient or to build resilience, pushing yourself to do things that you don't feel like doing at times when you don't feel like doing them is exactly the point.
Yes.
Right. And so,
brilliantly put.
The ice bath is probably the best example of that, right? Like when I was first getting into ice bathing, I read Wim Hof's book. I read it on a plane for the first time. I found it at home, by the way. I just found it. It was on the bookshelf at home. It was probably sent to me or Vogue a while ago. Whatever. But I hadn't read it, and I thought, I'll read that. And I was reading it on the plane, and it was talking about the breathwork, which I'd never believed in. To if I'm being completely honest, I thought it was total bollocks. Right, breathwork. I was just like, oh my God, what another bit of bullshit for everyone nonsense. To get into.
Absolutely.
And I was reading it on the plane, and he was talking about the 30 kind of big, deep breaths. And I was on an EasyJet flight to Spain, and we had a couple of hours. And I thought, fuck it, I'll do it. I'll do it, right? So I'm reading it on the plane, and I started doing it on the plane. And I started like literally kind of like passing out almost and having all these incredible feelings from the breathing. And I was like, no way. Like, no, but I actually couldn't fathom this thing. And I did a breath hold on the plane because it said, do one afterwards. And I held my breath for like over 2 minutes. First time. And I was like, what is going on?
How
like, and I got to the hotel, and the hotel had a cold plunge, and I couldn't believe it. And I was like, oh my God, I'm a Wim Hofer, and I got so into it. And every day at the hotel, I got into this cold plunge, which was actually more like 8 degrees or something.
Yeah.
Got in for like 20 seconds and was having like some melt. It was so cold.
Yeah, 8 is tough.
Like, I'd fly out into the sauna. And I'd do my breath work every day, and I built up to like a 4-minute breath hold. And I couldn't believe that this stuff like wasn't known by everyone.
It's crazy. And what was the feat? So what are you getting from that? Because, clearly at that point you get almost the euphoria, that those high ventilation techniques they perfuse your brain full of oxygen, the cold. What was it you were getting from it?
Just an experience unlike any I'd ever had. The teaching yourself to endure the pain of the cold was really interesting to me. And when I started to read more about cold exposure, deliberate cold exposure, I found it really interesting that your brain releases all of these chemicals like dopamine in high levels. You become stressed, but it does not release any cortisol. If you are doing it deliberately. Your brain's a very clever thing.
Very clever.
It's like, falling off a boat in the Antarctic is going to release cortisol. Obviously, you will be actually stressed.
Yeah.
If you are deliberately cold plunging, you will not release any cortisol, so you will not actually be stressed. But your brain and your body will respond to stress like you're stressed without any of the cortisol. And essentially, stressful situations that arise then throughout the rest of the day become less stressful because you've already experienced this insane rush of stress without the stress.
Absolutely right.
In the morning or whenever it is you do your ice bathing. So, you may find that if you're quick to respond to your kids or, things bother you in a way ordinarily, if you have a cold shower in the morning, they might bother you less because your body's reception to stress has already been tested.
That is such a great description that is really accurate. And actually, loops me into point number 2. I've got to just give you your score on the fitness. You haven't even asked for it.
What is it?
100 out of 100.
Is it?
Got to give you 100. Because of your sheer baseline you train extraordinarily well. Your training volume is a phenomenon. When we wrap in the hours of cardio interspaced with the resistance training, which is done at a really high level. Again, another shout out to Sean Stafford, who's curating a magnificent training program. The reality is that is great, but the execution also into your physiology with that high VO2 max means that there's no room there for any improvements whatsoever. And you've got great tutelage and great dedication to that. So if we didn't give you 100, everyone listening would be like, well, what hope is there for me? If Spencer doesn't get 100, then God knows what I would get.
Well, that's very kind. And also, there are many people who are much who train much harder than me and stuff. But yeah, thank you.
And there's probably not great value to more, right? In terms of, and that brings us to recovery, because you're we'll look at sleep third, but your recovery is the area that I've had to draw again from this sort of last month and a bit of data via Whoop. And recovery, as it's defined, is how long over each 24 hours you're spending recouping energy. When we look at the balance of nervous systems, we're generally saying that life is busy and activates this system called the sympathetic nervous system. And when we're restoring energy, we activate this parasympathetic. You've got good understanding of both of these, I sense.
I just love it all. I think it's so interesting.
It's so great. And I
find it odd that I walked the earth for so long not caring about this stuff.
I think you get to it when you're ready for it. And I think the danger is, people have to want to understand why they feel a certain way. And in many ways, what's fascinating about some of the choices you've made, previously in life is your body's often telling you that it's not happy with something, and then we cover that symptom up. And there comes a point where everyone should listen to that symptom and try and understand what are the tools within their control to influence the way they feel. And your recovery is, of the 3 areas, the most under threat. When we look at why your recovery will be the weakest of the 3, is because recovery is almost time away from stress and load. So I'm using load. Load's always a controversial word, but fundamentally, load is
well, not always.
Yeah, load is really when you're asking your body to perform tasks. You're putting it under some kind of strain, and stress can be both physical and psychophysiological. As in, I'm dealing with getting the kids ready for school, yada yada. So your recovery score over the period of the month was 62 out of 100, and clearly you've got activities like cold. We also talked about heat. Again, you've got a sauna, I think, at your disposal.
I do.
And of the heat and the cold, they're both part of your standard recovery processes?
Yeah, I mean, in the evening, my wife and I typically jump in a sauna like 15 minutes, and then we cold plunge. And then from time to time, well, she will then get back in the sauna.
Yeah.
I tend not to get back in the sauna. I love how the cold plunge makes me feel.
Yeah.
But when you're in it for a while and you try and recover without the sauna or a hot shower, it can be like really difficult.
Can be.
It makes this Antarctic challenge, which is one of the 7 legs of my next challenge, really scary.
So again, for those listening, you'll be doing an Ironman in Antarctica as your 7th Ironman in a relative, an extraordinarily tight time frame, and that's going to be a 3.2K.
3.8K swim.
3.8K swim in what temperature will the water be?
0.1, 0.2. Yeah, it's frozen essentially. But it's well, I could be wrong. I think when Anders Hoffman did his he's got an incredible film out on Apple called Project Iceman.
Yeah.
In which he was the first man to ever do an Ironman in Antarctica, and that was his project.
Yeah.
So obviously I've been studying him and his efforts. I think it was literally it wasn't 1 degree, it was less than 1 degree. It's more just when the cold gets you and you allow it in, and this is a big psychological thing.
Yes.
When obviously it's physical as well.
Yes.
But when the cold gets into your bones, and it can happen really quickly.
Yeah.
It's a great big problem. And obviously in the comfort of your home,
you can change the environment.
You can change the environment. You can jump under a big fat duvet, you can put hoodies on, you can, chuck yourself back in your sauna if you have one. I have one for exactly this reason, basically.
Yeah.
In Antarctica, those luxuries will not be there. And I was really worried last night. Like I got out of I did an ice bath for 6 minutes in 0 degrees. And I got out, and for the first 5 minutes, I was completely fine.
Yeah.
I stayed outside for a while, was wandering around, looking at my phone on the Whoop, felt phenomenal.
Yeah.
And it was cold outside as well. No problem. I was like, okay, this is great.
Did you do the post? Did you do the sort of activations?
I didn't actually, which I probably should have done.
Yeah.
And I was sidetracked by my phone and listening to Eminem and all kinds of other things. And then I came back into the bedroom, and literally my body just went just like and out of nowhere. Like it wasn't gradual. It was this onslaught of teeth chattering and like you're in all kinds of trouble like straight away. And it was like I fought it for 2-3 minutes, and then I just dove into a boiling hot shower and like failed basically. Failed in what I was looking to do. Which was a good lesson to learn, but like, and then I was thinking, because it's deeply unpleasant, and that's the kind of early stages of hypothermia.
Yes.
If you were to get out of the 3.8 kilometer swim, and that were to happen, you're in all kinds of trouble. If you jump in the water and that happens early, you're in all kinds of trouble.
Has anyone looked at your body fat levels as a potential contributor to that? Because what I have one strategic advantage over you: a little bit more fat.
Yes.
Not loads. Let's be clear for those listening. Enough. Plenty. Not loads. Reasonably within the boundaries. But clearly the role of brown fat in particular and fat in generating heat. You will have to look at whether you are, and I don't know what physical shape Anders was in, etc. But one of the things when you look at traditional ice swimmers, etc., they don't have visible abs.
Right.
A la Spencer Matthews, and therefore there's that question mark of if you're looking at it, does your body fatness play a role here?
We're gonna do Antarctica last, so
which is a challenge because you're gonna get even more stripped down.
Yeah, so I think the order we're going to tackle it in is going to be um uh, Africa, Australia, Asia, Europe, North America, South America, Antarctica.
Yeah.
And it's going to be, initially I thought it would be a good idea to start with Antarctica, just get it out of the way. And my coach was just like, Antarctica is going to be so awful
Yeah.
that your mind, regardless of who you are, is going to be dented,
Yeah.
heading into another 6 iron then in,
could derail
in 2
the whole
weeks.
thing.
He just said it's not going to be a pleasant thing at all for you to think. And also there's a chance that, recovery will take a long time.
Yes.
I think Anders was on the bike for 38 hours.
I think the hot and the cold is a brilliant part of a day-to-day routine. That's almost that return to sport recovery. We'll see that deployed in elite athletes as ways of reducing the inflammation from exercise and getting ready to train again tomorrow. You train daily, so you do need that recovery.
If you have a cold,
yeah,
is cold plunging good or bad?
Generally not good, because it's a stress. It's a stress, and then it becomes recovery. It's a fascinating thing.
I told my wife that she should get in the cold plunge to get rid of her cold.
Can we contact her before she gets in? Or
she's been in.
Yeah,
she's been in. But isn't it? Is there? This is going to sound a bit stupid now. I actually think I probably have sounded all right for this interview, considering it's scientific.
Exceptional.
No, but this is going to sound dumb. Can you get rid of illness?
Yeah.
By making your body, your vessel, less hospitable. So, will illness thrive in a very comfortable, warm environment? Is what I'm trying to say.
No, and if you look at that, your body has its own internal mechanisms of burning a virus to pieces, which is a fever. Which is why when someone is got a fever, you don't cool them, because the fever is doing the job. Right? Okay. It's killing the virus or whichever bacteria. You're heating it out of its operating range.
That's kind of annoying. Like when I am ill,
yes,
I like to I like the idea that I can force the thing out of me by being just like an absolute, wild, inhospitable animal, like Antarctica.
There's a hell of an. Listen, I think the data wouldn't be there to say yay or nay. I think that the danger is if you increase your core temperature, exponentially, you're creating an additional stress, when what you want is your body's own defense mechanisms to have all the freedom to operate as much as possible. So the body is clever. It's very clever.
It's very clever. So yesterday I woke up, I was kind of coughing up this quite thick stuff, and when your throat is just like completely cut to hell, and you've got a cold or flu or whatever it might be,
fighting something.
Really bunged up nose. So I punished it by going on the bike for 2 hours, and then lifting some weights, and then I cold plunged for 6 minutes and stuff, just to frighten it.
Yes,
I wanted it to go, I don't like being in this in this body. I want to exist in someone that sat on a couch all day.
And there's a challenge. Exercise and stress is extremely good for boosting your immune system until it's not. So it's a bell curve. So if you're not active, that challenges your immune system. If you're just the right level of active, and then if you're too active, it sort of kills it the other side. And when we look at recovery overall, because you're high energy, beautifully high energy, intense as your agent and manager would say, others would just call you a high resonance person. Where do you find your greatest source of decompression? Is there a stillness? Because that energy, look, the recovery score is not perfect because your physical activity is so high. Your sleep's pretty good, actually. I'll touch on it in a second. But recovery needs those moments of stillness. Those moments where we're in the moment. What's your mechanism for that?
I tend to cycle everywhere or walk everywhere.
Yeah.
So I no longer take cabs really, or the tube even. Like even if I need to be in the on the other side of the city, I'll line bike.
Yeah. So it's movement again. Things like the breath work. What's interesting, even with your breath work, you've gone to high ventilatory. So do you do anything that you're completely still, completely calm, that restores you energy, or is that just not in the wheelhouse?
That's in the evening. I don't kind of run around like a madman. I'll relax in the evening. But I'm pretty active during the day most of the time. When I came out of the desert, I needed to nap during the day.
That's interesting.
I was so exhausted. But also my body underwent, significant physical change. I lost 12 kilos, in a month, and I didn't really have 12 kilos to lose.
No.
So it was kind of, it was quite full on. I found myself very tired. But yeah, I mean, I tend to try and be quite nice to myself. I have the good fortune, I suppose, or pleasure of working for myself.
Yeah.
So I created CleanCo. I run that business, and Untapped. I've left all my other shows to do Untapped.
So exciting.
Because I really, really care about it, and I want it to be, an extension of me, and I see it existing for 20, 30 years. It's relevant. It's not. It's not really an entertainment show. It's not something I have to, it's something that I live and breathe and care about. So all of my focus is going into that. But but no, to answer your question, I limit greatly the amount of alcohol that I drink.
Yeah.
That has been probably the biggest change in my life.
Yeah.
So I'm not teetotal, but I was teetotal. I was teetotal for 3 years. I really needed to be. Like it wasn't an option. I would have lost everything.
Yeah.
I'd have lost my. I don't mean to sound melodramatic. I could have lost my life, but I was a very bad drinker for a long time. I would have certainly lost my wife, my family potentially. That needed immediate action.
Brilliant.
After sustaining alcohol abuse for call it 10 years, possibly 12. That was a massive change. And then in the 3 years that I didn't touch alcohol, I was able to completely change my view, learn a lot. I learned so much about it that actually now I'm fully aware of how unhealthy alcohol is in a way that I was never conscious of before.
Yeah.
Like I put alcohol in a very similar bracket to Class A drugs.
Yeah.
It's unhealthy in the sense that fried chicken is unhealthy. I'll eat it every so often, but I'm aware that it's not a great meal.
Informed choice, informed use. Yeah, that's a really good phrase.
It's kind of do I ever feel like having an alcoholic drink? Sometimes, quite rarely. I scratch the itch if I feel like scratching the itch, but it's not like an addictive itch. It's kind of
you've changed your relationship.
It's kind of like I haven't drank in 3-4 weeks. Yeah. Having a few margaritas with the boys over dinner would be quite fun.
Yeah.
Whatever. I'm aware that it's going to drive my HRV to 10. I'm aware that my recovery will be red. I'm aware that I won't get my nice 8 hours that I want, but I don't care in that moment because I don't need to be perfect.
That's very well put. And I think that for me, alcohol, people's lack of understanding about what it does to recovery, you're using that phrase HRV, heart rate variability is slaughtered by alcohol.
Slaughtered. Like a pig,
gutted like a swine.
It is.
But, and arguably that's why most people feel, difficult with alcohol. It's not the detoxification. It's not the liver challenge. It's fundamentally, it robs you, it fragments sleep, kills physiological recovery, and that leaves an energy deficit.
On top of that, though, it is incredibly bad for your mental state. And I'm not sat here preaching that people shouldn't drink alcohol. No. Anyone listening to this should do exactly what they want. An alcohol journey is a very personal thing. My mental state is altered for days.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Like if I abuse alcohol one evening, say it's a wedding.
Yep.
We all drink, champagne until 3 a.m.
Yeah.
My mood, it's a pleasure-pain balance, right?
Yes.
So Dr. Anna Lemke writes about this very eloquently, and I love her. I love to get her on Untapped. She describes your mind as a seesaw.
Yeah.
And if you're drinking, pleasure, dopamine. Her book's called Dopamine Nation. When it comes back down to level, it has to dip into pain. It doesn't exist. It's a seesaw, so it doesn't go pleasure normal.
Yeah.
It goes pleasure normal pain.
Yeah.
Pain normal.
Yeah.
So depending on how much pleasure you give yourself and what an easy dopamine fix you get, you will pay that back in pain, and that is with anxiety, headaches, depression, whatever it might be. Unfortunately, I've not been depressed, so I didn't mean to use that in a flippant sense, but
it's a compromised mood state, and you can now make an informed choice.
But I will feel it as well. So this isn't something I've read in a book.
Yes.
Like if I drink alcohol, I will be dehydrated the following day. My sleep won't be so good. Therefore, my mood will not be elevated. My energy that I love so much will be depleted.
Yes.
I will have less care and attention towards my children and my wife. I will be a little bit of a shell of myself. I'll also have the resentment of having done it, and I'll feel slightly ashamed of having done it because I used to abuse it so regularly.
Yes.
So I have all of these other things that I associate with drinking that come straight back to the surface that I am delighted are gone most of the time.
Yeah.
But for me, it's far more complicated than just having a few drinks.
Yes.
It's this reminder of my former self that I hate.
Yeah.
And it's this thing that is there all of a sudden again. It's like, oh, look at you, had fun last night, getting absolutely hammered, out of your mind like you used to.
Yeah.
So it's this, and then it's kind of like, right, what can I do to punish myself for that? And this is just the way I am. And people listening to this might think, God, all sounds a bit, whatever. But this is the truth of it. I'll enjoy a few drinks, and then the following day I'll go, right, well, I'll run 30K on Saturday. I'll do 2 hours on the bike today. I'll do all this stuff, and then I'll feel fine again.
You'll offset it.
Yeah, and I offset it as a pleasure pain thing. But
there's
so
two
for me,
parts
it's
there.
complicated. It's not as easy as just enjoying yourself.
No, but you're making, again, a conscious choice. You're saying that dose of pleasure I will offset against a pretty predictable pain pattern, which is crucial. You also, a few times you said, I'm ashamed of that period. I'm ashamed of that guy. I hated myself. Clearly, you weren't a terrible human being, Spencer. Have you forgiven yourself, your old version of yourself? Because it sort of led you to where you are now.
Yes, of course. No, I'm sorry. I'm aware of that, right? Like, had I not been a certain way, I probably wouldn't be where I am now, which I'm thankful for.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to be honest with how I feel about it. I don't kind of think it's okay. And if my son, or any of my children for that matter, started being like I used to be, it would be something that I would be quite uncomfortable with. And by used to be, I mean that I'm so interested in this idea of potential.
Yeah.
And that everyone has potential, and that everyone can do awesome stuff and, get those jobs that they want or build that business that they think can change the world. And I think I suppress that so much in myself that I just don't want anybody else to be doing that, because it's such a shame. Like, I look at my life from the age of kind of, call it 19 to 29.
Yeah.
As a little bit of a waste of time and potential, and it's a shame. And I'm not, but had I not
got you to here. I
know, but I know. I'm just trying to. I don't have kind of an answer for you. It's just how I feel sometimes.
Well, that's fair.
I don't look back at it and go like, well, that's all well and good, because now I'm here now. I use it as fuel to go further.
Yeah.
Still.
Beautiful.
It's not to say that I'm, that I wouldn't forgive that person. I don't even recognize the guy. Like, it's a weird thing.
So
I should probably talk about it in therapy, which I don't do much of anymore either, because it's interesting to me as well.
Yeah.
But like, when I recently did a program for the BBC, which has already aired, about, it's called My Life at Christmas. It came out in December.
Yeah.
And in it, they play some stuff from Made in Chelsea, and they played it to me on the day. And I looked at it and I just thought, it makes me recoil inside. And I look at it and I physically, I think, look so different to that person as well. And it's like, it's almost like that person it isn't real to me. Like, it doesn't exist. Like, the fact that it's me is so odd to me. And that's awesome in itself, I suppose, because it's an actual journey. Not only is it a journey through life, but it's like a complete 180 physically as well, mentally, physically. It's just a strange thing to me. I don't really like that person exists for all to see still. I'd rather that was just gone in the rearview mirror. And, I can speak about him whenever I like then.
Yes, yeah.
But it's actually just there.
Because it's living document, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think you have evolved into something, which is adding huge value. And I think not through this medium, through your podcast, through the accomplishments, bringing a huge amount of inspiration to other people. And that's that's a great accomplishment.
Thank you. That honestly, that's where I'd love to be, and that was born out of people being incredibly kind after the Great Desert Challenge, the 30 marathons. Like I just, as I said at the very beginning of the interview, I really wasn't expecting it to have this positive impact on people's lives, and then I began to think, well, let's go. Only that.
Lean in.
Let's try to only do that.
So good. Now we're tight on time. I still haven't spoken about sleep. So your recovery score,
sleep is delicious.
Sleep is delicious. So we don't need to spend much time on sleep because your average sleep is 8 hours 20.
Is it?
Yeah.
8:20.
8:20.
Wow.
Yeah, which is good. But you also your time spent in rapid eye movement sleep, REM sleep, is quite substantial. So 2 hours plus, which is forming 25% of your sleep. Your time in deep sleep is about 90 minutes to a little bit further. Deep sleep, those sort of first few sleep cycles have more deep sleep in it. That's when you build the muscle tissue. That's when you build your immune system, as much as all the other stuff you're doing. The REM sleep is your processing, your creative brain. So your stages are great. Your volume's great. Your consistency is great. You're pretty good within going to bed and waking up at a similar time.
Yeah.
So your sleep's boringly good.
I was literally about to use that word, boring. But isn't it cool to be boring?
When it comes to sleep, when most people, have erratic sleep times, inadequate sleep volume, and when we look at the fact you're this sort of, this high energy creature through the day, you sleep appropriately. And I think, your training volume is huge, diverse, well curated. You are energetic through the day for physical reasons, but clearly purpose-driven reasons, clearly resonance with other human beings. You're a high-energy guy. Your sleep is an anchor to that. It's keeping everything steady and secure. And you get enough recovery in your sleep to offset the fact you don't really chill during the day, albeit you're able to bring yourself to moments of calm. I still think being active is your form of recovery. And looking at the outputs in terms of data, accomplishments, how you look and feel, I think you can say that template at the moment is working for you. So it's been an utter joy to have some insights, A, into the data, B, into the man, and a chance to sit with you and talk about energy.
It's a great pleasure. And what an incredible concept and show.